What screams, "I live on daddy's money"? I used to work with a guy years ago. We were both in our mid-20s, and both working in junior white-collar jobs, making around the same pay. So while it was okay money, it wasn't amazing. This guy was buying his third home in as many years. Like, he already owned two, lived in one, rented out the other, nice houses, and was buying a third and keeping the other two to build a mini property portfolio. When I told him that my wife, who also worked a white-collar job, and I couldn't afford a down payment, he responded, "Just ask your family for the money." That's what I do. When I responded that A, they didn't have the kind of money, and B, even if they did, we weren't comfortable doing that, he just couldn't understand it. He was visibly confused, because it was outside his little bubble. An old coworker of mine, who was a super nice guy, never made any higher than $40,000. He was able to buy a house while his wife stayed home with his son, got a brand new Lexus every 2 years or so, posts pictures of him on traveling on planes all the time in first class and or a private jet. His first year at work he'd talk to us like all of this common, but I think he learned pretty quickly to keep quiet about his privileged life. I, 30F, just started to date a guy, not too long after I lost a job. I took a roommate in to help me pay the rent and he got mad. Said that he will be less comfortable because of the privacy and couldn't understand that I put money before the relationship. I said that I will not spit on $500 per month and that I won't be able to pay. His solution: ask money from my parents and wait a couple of months till he moves in and saves me. After a fight, I mostly discover that he still lived in his parents' home at 30. His whole shtick about "travel is my philosophy" suddenly seemed less cool. I broke up that week. For a period of time in the early 2000s I lived in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Rents in some parts of Williamsburg were and still are ridiculously expensive. I couldn't afford to live in the vicinity of the cool area, otherwise known as Bedford Avenue. Instead, I roomed with 5 other people in a converted 3-bedroom apartment about a 15 to 20 minute walk away from Bedford. Every so often I'd find myself at a cafe on Bedford Avenue and see all the starving artists sitting there looking like they just rolled out of bed for hours on end. It was clear they didn't have anywhere they needed to be. Rents for a 1BR on/near Bedford were often north of $2,000 per month, and that was in 2001/2002. No way in hell you're 18 to 22 years old, and paying your own bills working part-time if you live there. I knew a guy, oh boy, we went to town to go shopping for some things, and he parked his car in a no-parking spot. I told him that he couldn't park there and he said, "Sure I can, it just costs me €370." I've never been that baffled by a response before in my life. Basically everybody who thinks there is nothing wrong with the economy and that simply getting any job still works, those people usually do work but always have some sort of indirect huge benefit. I had a friend who became an engineer after busting his ass in tech school for years, for example, but he never tells people how during that time his parents let him live in their vacant apartment they owned, or how he never had to get a car or worry about taking public transit because they just gave him cars they paid off. They weren't rich, but my friend likes to say, anyone can do what I did, but it isn't even remotely true. Most people would have failed utterly without those benefits, if they even managed to get started in the first place. These guys always forget their bonus money. Had a professional career mentor at my college for alumni. Made a meeting with the guy to ask about starting a business as an artisan, how to get studio space and pay for everything. Being an entrepreneur is not something taught at art school, but it's expected that you become one and know how to do it. I have no business savvy, I didn't know where to start. The man looked at me 10 minutes in and said, "You could just ask your parents to loan you 10 grand. I was at a complete loss for words. Number 1, thanks tips. If that was an option, do you think I would be here with you? Number 2, not everyone has a spare few tens of thousands hanging around for just funsies. Goodness. What planet are you even from? This man was in his 60s and completely clueless that asking for such a sum wasn't possible for some people, also, adults not knowing how student loans work. I work with a daddy's girl. She makes about $40,000 working in HR, but lives a Kardashian lifestyle. When my son graduated high school, she asked how he got to prom. I told her I drove him in my minivan, 'cause how the fuck else would he get there? She replied, when my brother had prom, I rented him an Aston Martin, or some other luxury car. I asked her did she rent it, or did her dad? She replied, I did of course, nothing is too good for my little brother. Completely oblivious to the difference between her money and her daddy's money. Another time she said out loud in the office, I don't like milk chocolate, it's for lower class people. I asked her what class she thinks she is. She replied, I'm upper class. I asked her how she is upper class on her salary. She replied, class is about more than income. True, I suppose. So far this year, she has taken 60+ sick days, and complained that our time-off policy is too restrictive. Yes, her collagen-injected lips formed those exact words. She wears sweatshirts around the office, and when questioned on her choices, in regards to the company dress code, she replies, it's a $600 sweater. Another time I commented on her new shoes, just being friendly. She just had to let me know they are very hard to find. I asked her if they were under her bed or something, went right over her professionally coiffed head. Finally, our new VP was starting and going to be parked in front of the building, in the parking spot she had been using. I reminded her that he will be parking there, as it's his space, and she would have to find another spot to park in. She told me, well, what kind of car does he drive? If mine's nicer, I should be able to park there. She drives a 2016 Audi. Yeah, she's a real treat, let me tell you. Disclaimer, this bitch was my former boss at one point. I say boss loosely because she was a lazy asshole who never showed up to her own business to work. She is an awful, awful person on many levels, but, anyway. Long story short, her parents bought her older sister a restaurant. She legit got jealous of her sister having a restaurant, and then her parents just bought her a restaurant of her own across the bridge so she could have one as well. The saddest part? She will not work in her own business. She will not work a whole week. She would rather hire managers, who she underpays, mistreats, literally tells people she can't pay them overtime because the IRS will be mad at her, and a bunch of other dumb shit. Overall, I hate this person a lot. She is a rich, spoiled, pompous trash degenerate and every other bad word you can think of to describe this clown.